Well, I'm originally from Bulgaria, and my husband, he's actually a chef here, and he's originally from Syria. As I see our employers, Michel and Alain, they came and start from scratch as we did. If you're willing to work hard, it's most likely that somebody will be able to give you credit, will trust in your dream and yourself, and that's why it's called the land of the dream, I guess.
Ever wonder why you don't see French fast food outlets in the U.S.? It's because the French don't view food the way we do. To them, dining is more of an art than an everyday necessity. In fact, the word restaurant is a French term. Perhaps that is why French restaurants remain very much in demand in America. Oh, and by the way, the French fry, it was invented by the Belgians. Michel and Alain Buthion run La Baguette, a French bistro which is one of the most popular restaurants in Oklahoma City. The two brothers grew up and studied at a culinary school in France, yet they chose to open their first restaurant more than 5,000 miles away in the United States. Why is that? The answer to this lies partly within the study of economics. For example, they could have started their business in France. Yet France is a socialist country. That means that the government taxes businesses and individuals at a very high rate in order to run fundamental services like education and health care. This makes life very difficult for would-be entrepreneurs.
The cost of working in France is so high that, you know, the taxes, the government policy is so hard to deal with that it is no way I could do it.
When I see my friend in France have the same business doing, I don't know, it seems so much more difficult in France than here.
Michel uses employee health insurance as an example.
Like for me, it will cost me maybe 15% to 22%, depending on the health insurance program we serve. In France, it'd be 50%.
In addition, according to Michel, if you want to open a restaurant in France, you've got to deal with extensive government red tape and, on occasion, corruption.
Well, in France, it's more or less like there is in the West Coast, East Coast. You have to buy an existing liquor license. If you are a big profit bar or big restaurant, some area in France are run by the mob, and they do not call that the mob, of course. It's like buying insurance.
It's bad enough to have to deal with criminals. What if the police force itself is corrupt? Maya, who works as a hostess at La Baguette, and her husband both dream about opening their own restaurant in Oklahoma, an entrepreneurial venture that would have been extremely difficult in her home country of Bulgaria.
Even if you find a way to establish a small business, I do believe that you will have more difficulties with the crime and the trust in the police.
Bulgaria is a country which has teetered between communism and socialism in the last decade, so let's use that as a segue to our next economic system. Let's say that Michel and Alain have moved to China to start their business. Surely there must be demand for new types of food there. Unfortunately, China, of course, is a communist country, which means they might not be allowed to start a business. And if they did, the government might control almost every aspect of it. Another problem with command economies like socialist France and communist China is that governments aren't as responsive and quick as the market itself, so they can create wasteful surpluses of goods or terrible shortages that can make financial survival very difficult for entrepreneurs that need supplies. The system that has led to wealth creation in much of the world is known as capitalism. This is an economic system in which all or most of the factors of production and distribution are privately owned and operated for profit. Of course, no country is purely capitalistic. Often, the government gets involved in issues such as determining minimum wages and setting farm prices, as it does in the United States. But the foundation of the U.S. free market system is capitalism, which in the case of Michel and Alain offer them 4 basic freedoms. They own their own business, they can purchase the property they operate on if they choose, they can compete in the restaurant market freely with minimal restrictions, and they can choose exactly what's on their menu, how to prepare it, and how much they want to charge for their dishes. Now that we've identified one reason why Michel and Alain started their business in the U.S., let's take a closer look at free market capitalism. How free markets work is an important part of economics. The main point is that prices are not determined by the sellers. They are determined by the buyers and sellers as they negotiate in the marketplace. Supply and demand is what determines market price. If Michel and Alain price their dishes too high, they might lose their customers. If they price them too low, people might question the quality of their food. It's interesting to see how world political events can affect a business like La Baguette. When America and France disagreed in 2003 on the Iraq War, public perception in the USA reduced the demand for French restaurants, and business slowed for La Baguette. They received 2 to 3 phone threats a day, and some long-time customers resolved to never eat there again. Michel was sympathetic to their feelings, however.
You cannot blame the American for doing this or that.
To him, it was more of a reflection on human nature.
It's a human thing. They have to blame somebody, you know. They don't look, a lot of people look like this.
There was one story that sticks out in his mind, however, about a woman with an umbrella that made a huge scene in the restaurant.
So the person came in and threw her umbrella at her. She said she bought it in Paris, and that umbrella was as useless as the French people are.
A few minutes later, it began to rain, and the woman returned, demanding her umbrella. Michel, well, he couldn't help himself.
I said, "Ma'am, sorry, we threw it away. You told us it was useless."
Luckily for La Baguette, things turned out fine.
A local newspaper grabbed that story and edited a very nice article.
After that, new and old customers began to come into the restaurant in droves, and business was better than ever. Economic problems often affect restaurants like La Baguette as well. The dot-com bust of the early 2000s pushed the economy into a recession, causing unemployment and decline in the stock market. Once again, La Baguette was fortunate. Oklahoma, because of the nature of its economy and industry, did not lose a lot of local jobs when the internet bubble collapsed, so La Baguette's relatively upscale customer base was not affected by the recession. The same was not true for many upscale restaurants in areas like Silicon Valley. A lot of people ask Michel and Alain why they don't open additional restaurants. They've even been approached about consulting in Japan and in France at Euro Disney. They've turned down all offers.
Those people with 5, 6 restaurants or a chain, those are not restaurateurs, they are food industry.
This gets back to that French attitude about fast food. Michel and Alain saw a need for a quality French restaurant in Oklahoma City, and they've chosen to supply that demand.
And I think me and Alain are truly a restaurateur. He's in the kitchen, I'm in the front. It'd be like, you know, a couple who have wife and husband who do that. And we're very happy with that.
Happy indeed. Michel and Alain's decision to open a restaurant in Oklahoma City demonstrates that the foundations upon which the U.S. was built are alive and well. 200 years later, people are still coming to America for the freedoms it provides and because it boasts one of the most flexible and resilient economies in the world. And that is something that we all benefit from. On that note, it sounds like it's time for a traditional French toast.
Ok, je vous dis à votre santé et puis j'espère vous voir à Oklahoma, à notre table pour vous régaler.
Oh, and by the way, French toast, it was invented in Albany, New York.